Product development is like a game. Take the example of any game, be it cricket, baseball, basketball, or any other sports. Every game has a strategy. You don't just jump onto the field and start playing. Same way, in the game of product development, you also need to strategize. Before you start working on developing features in a sprint, it is essential to understand the outcome of the sprint and then create a plan to achieve it. This event in Scrum is called as sprint planning. What's the purpose of sprint planning? The purpose of sprint planning is to define the outcome of the sprint, like a business objective or a learning goal like validating the hypothesis, and then to create a plan to achieve it. It would also help to define the key progress indicators to measure the outcome. What are the inputs, activities, and outputs for the sprint planning? The prioritize product backlog, the product increment from the previous sprints, the team's capacity for the sprint, and the past performance of the team are the inputs for sprint planning. During the sprint planning, the teams work in two parts. 1. Identifying what are we doing in the sprint. 2. How are we going to work together to make it happen? The output of the sprint planning is sprint goal and sprint backlog. You may also have key progress indicators to measure the progress as output. One of the inputs for sprint planning is the prioritize product backlog. Based on the feedback that is received from the stakeholders during the sprint review, the business needs, market conditions, user inputs, dependencies, etc., the product owner works with the stakeholders and the development team continuously and creates a refined, sized, and a prioritized product backlog with the essential product backlog items on the top. Another input for sprint planning is product increment. The product increment is the outcome from the previous sprints. It is a working piece of product that has been developed so far by the development team. The new features that will be developed in this sprint will be inclusive of all the features that were developed from all the previous sprints. Team's capacity also acts as an input to the sprint planning. The team's capacity is the team's availability during the sprint to work on the development. This helps the team to plan their work effectively. Another input for sprint planning is the team's past performance. The past performance of the team indicates the team's collective capability of how much valuable work can be done in a sprint towards vision. This will help the team to forecast. This could be represented in the form of the number of product backlog items delivered in a sprint, or the number of story points delivered in a sprint, etc., which the team generally calls as velocity. What do you do in sprint planning? Sprint planning has two topics. The first topic is, what can be done in this sprint? The product owner discusses the objective that the sprint should achieve and the product backlog items that, if completed in the sprint, would achieve the sprint goal. For example, let's say you are building a product to help the doctors be effective in diagnosing the patient's problem quickly and accurately. One of the sprint may have a goal to reduce the time that the doctors spend in talking to the patients to understand their medical history. The second topic is, how will the chosen work get done? The development team, based on their collective capability, forecasts what end-to-end functionality can be delivered in the sprint to achieve the goal and how they plan to deliver it. For example, for the goal of reducing the doctor's time talking with the patients to understand their medical history, the possible product backlog items could include the patient's medical history, the pre-existing medical condition checklist, capture recent vitals, capture symptoms, and Alexa integration for capturing data. These items form the sprint backlog. Optionally, the teams can split these product backlog items into specific tasks. What I also recommend doing as a part of sprint planning is to identify ways to measure the outcome, like the key progress indicators or the KPIs. For example, you may want to measure the time the doctors spend with the patients and the percentage of successful diagnosis to measure the progress towards our sprint goal. The outcome of sprint planning is sprint goal and sprint backlog. Sprint goal gives the team the flexibility to inspect and adapt the plan and self-organize to achieve the objective. The sprint backlog helps the team collaborate towards the sprint goal. Optionally, if you have defined KPIs, they help you in measuring if the outcome has been achieved at the end of the sprint.